Sunnyside, the place where transplants go to live to the place, next to the place, next to the place that they originally wanted to live in. It's no lie that Manhattan rent is astronomical. A one-bedroom can cost almost as much as the median salary in the United States. So when those moving to New York cannot afford the Manhattan rent, especially in this area, they either go further north into Upper Manhattan or the Bronx, or cross over the river into Queens or Brooklyn. But apparently, expensive is contagious. The closer you are to Manhattan, the more expensive rent will be. So those transplants that cannot afford to live in the borough of their dreams, or the place next to it, they try the place next to the place next to the place. And today, we are going to talk about one of those places. Welcome to Sunnyside. And welcome to Urban Caffeine. My name is Thea and you're watching a channel that's all things New York City, specifically its neighborhoods and public transit. And if you like this video, make sure to hit that like button so that YouTube knows to share it. Sunnyside is a neighborhood in Queens. It's bounded by Astoria, Long Island City, Zombieland, and Woodside. As I said in my other neighborhood videos, these boundaries of New York are cultural boundaries that shift over time. Some neighborhoods in New York City have boundaries that are clearly defined, and some are open for interpretation. As a side note, I talked about Long Island City and Woodside in previous videos. Check those out in the description if you haven't already. And if you want to learn more about cemeteries in Queens, I touch a little bit on that on the Woodside video.
Approaching the station, please stand away from the platform edge.
While there are major roads that run along and through Sunnyside, it also has access to the 7 train. And not too far away is the Long Island Railroad in neighboring Woodside, which is a long-distance commuter rail in New York. There are also local buses, express buses, and Citi Bikes. Although it has just one subway line, the 7 can easily take you to Queensboro, Court Square, Grand Central, Bryant Park, and Times Square. With the 7 train, you can easily transfer to almost all the other subway lines. So if you live in Sunnyside, you can get to most places with just one subway transfer. However, it's important to note that the stations at Sunnyside are local stops. How it goes is along the 7 route, there are 2 trains, a local train and an express train, distinguishable by either a circle or a diamond. The local train will stop at all stations along the 7 line in both directions 24 hours a day. During rush hour, the express train will supplement the local train in the direction of rush hour traffic, skipping some stations. For example, in the mornings, the direction of rush hour traffic will be towards Manhattan. So there will be both a local and express 7 going this direction, and just a local train going the opposite direction. The Express 7 will skip these local stations. This is to speed up the commute of people that are mostly heading into Manhattan. So if you're traveling the direction of rush hour traffic and need to stop somewhere in Sunnyside, be careful that you don't hop on an express train. Otherwise, you'll skip Sunnyside altogether. The problem when you live in a local stop is that you're forced to take a local train. If you live deeper in Queens, your commute could be pretty slow with a local train if you're stopping at all the stops. You have the option of transferring to an express train once you get to an express station, so you can skip the rest of the local stops. Or you can stay on your local train and endure a slower commute. In Sunnyside, it doesn't matter that much if you get on a local train just because there are not a lot of local stops coming up after it. But it can be annoying when you accidentally get to an express train going home from Manhattan and not realize it until you skip your stop in Sunnyside altogether. So something to consider. And this is something to keep in mind when you're looking for a place to live. Sure, that place might have a subway station nearby, but service changes during rush hour might affect you. As far as layout goes, many businesses will logically be near public transit, with some small businesses scattered throughout. But the majority of Sunnyside is residential. And we're not talking super tall buildings like in Manhattan. Homes in Sunnyside are mostly pre-war apartments, multifamily, and single-family homes. And 10-minute walks will look like this. People can easily walk to get food, and other everyday needs. This makes Sunnyside a walker's paradise, according to walkscore.com. Despite being small, Sunnyside is very community-centered, with schools, libraries, parks and playgrounds, community and cultural centers, and a farmer's market that's open all year round. About the parks though, a well-known park is Sunnyside Gardens in the northern part of Sunnyside, which is part of a historic district. However, it's a private one, accessible only to those living in its district. Sometimes they do offer memberships to those that don't live in this area, but it's extremely limited. As far as private parks go, New York City has 2 of them. Gramercy Park in Manhattan is accessible only to those living in its defined area. And it's the same with Sunnyside Gardens. This particular park is only accessible to people living in its defined historic district. But not only do you have to be a resident of this area, you also have to pay a membership and accomplish some volunteer hours. Like I said, they do offer memberships to those that do not live in this area. The amount of memberships they offer is dependent on how many of the regular members they get that year. And not only that, it's a lottery. So what's so special about this park? Well, it has tennis courts, a playground, soccer and baseball fields, basketball courts, and more. I think the appeal is exclusivity. You're not competing with people for courts, and everybody going to the park is vetted for. But I wouldn't know. I'm not cool enough to be a private garden member. But Sunnyside Gardens isn't the only recreational green space in Sunnyside. There are other parks that don't require memberships. And don't forget, there are also the cemeteries, the original public park. Like I said in my Woodside video, before public parks was a thing, cemeteries were the only place that people had to find some peace and quiet. And it's still an option today. And regarding that farmer's market, I have to admit the Sunnyside farmer's market is not that large, and during the cold season, it's slim pickings. It's not as impressive as, say, the Union Square farmer's market. But having a farmer's market in any neighborhood is great because it's access to local and fresh produce. And farmer's markets, at least in New York City, accept SNAP credits or what others call food stamps. And speaking of food, Sunnyside is very diverse when it comes to food and culture. Here you can find Colombian food, Italian, Paraguayan, Mexican, Romanian, Peruvian, Bolivian, Salvadoran, and many more. Sunnyside even has its own restaurant week that's been going on for over a decade now. What happens during this week is that restaurants offer a 3-course prix-fixe meal for $35. It's similar to the restaurant week in Manhattan, but within Sunnyside. I think it's the diverse community and diverse food options that's most attractive about Sunnyside. It's walkable, it has public transit, and even though it only has 1 subway line, it still has all your daily basic needs within walking distance. Sure, it doesn't have a waterfront like LIC in Brooklyn, but it's a peaceful community, not to mention diverse. And one thing about this waterfront, yes, it does not get a lot of tourists that are not from New York, but it does get a lot of local tourists. These are people that live deeper into Queens and drive into Long Island City to spend a day at the waterfront on the weekends. And it can get really packed on a nice day and throughout the summer. In Sunnyside, it's going to be more peaceful. There are a lot of places like Sunnyside that are walkable, meaning you don't have to travel far and you can walk to the grocery store, the gym, public transit, and other things that you need day in and day out. Manhattan is easy to get to, but you're far away enough not to be bombarded with tourists. Basically, you get Manhattan access without the super high Manhattan rent. If you compare rent in Sunnyside to rent in other parts of the United States, yes, it's going to look freakishly expensive. But relatively speaking, for New York City, it's more affordable than, say, Greenwich, Dumbo, or Long Island City. If you're looking for walkability, diversity, and public transit, Sunnyside is a good place to start. If you live in a place like Sunnyside, comment down below. I would love to hear about other walkable communities, whether it's in New York or not. And if you do live in Sunnyside, comment your favorite restaurant. I know you all eat well. And you all must be wondering, who are all these people on the side here? These folks are Patreon members who have access to all my extra content. If you want to support this channel while gaining access to extra videos, check out patreon.com/Urban Caffeine. Thank you to all patrons. Until next time, thank you all so much for watching and happy New Yorking.